Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for Broadband Deployment News. So the Treasury Department has released their final rules for the American Recovery Plan Act, the broadband funds that are going to go with that coronavirus package that was put together a while back, and they've just now come out with some final rules that made just a few modifications. So I'll be right back to tell you what those are. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here at Zcorum. So as I mentioned, the Treasury Department has put together some final rules, or I guess they've made a few changes to their interim final rules that were released, and there's just a few little modifications in there that you might want to be aware of. So I was going to take you through that real quick. So this is the document, all 437 or so pages of it. So we're not going to by any means go through that. There's just a few little pages that I want to point out. But yeah, 437 pages of the final rules. As you can see here, this rule implements the Coronavirus State Final Recovery Fund and the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund established under the American Rescue Plan Act. Effective date of the rules, provision of the final rule are effective April 1, 2022. But so originally, the interim rules came out in May 17, 2021. And actually, I just did a broadcast a couple weeks ago about the interim rules. I went through those because I was talking about the fact that there's a lot of money in the ARPA fund that you can get right now. You don't need to wait for the Biden infrastructure bill. It's going to be sometime next year, probably, before funds are released on that. You don't need to wait. ARPA is available right now. But they've just now finalized the funds, the final rules, and there's just a few modifications. So again, 437 pages, I believe. We will go ahead and skip several hundred of those. I was just going to go down here to page, I think it was 296, something like that. Right about here, yeah. So again, just a couple of changes. I did, as I mentioned on that prior broadcast, go through some of the interim rules where I explained some of the things that are in there. You might want to go check that out. I will put a link in the comments on YouTube for you to check out after this broadcast. So here first is a summary of the public comments on a couple of things that changed. So it says Treasury received several comments on the interim final rules requirements regarding eligible areas for investment in build-to-speed standards, as well as Treasury's encouragements in the supplementary information of the interim final rule. Many commenters found the interim final rules requirement to limit projects to those designed to provide service to unserved or underserved households or businesses to be appropriately focused on hard-to-reach areas. So some people liked it, said, yeah, it's appropriately focused. In contrast, other commenters argued that this requirement was too restrictive and that it would limit the ability for some recipients, particularly local governments, to invest in broadband infrastructure. And ARPA works very similar to the IIJA, or BEAD, the Broadband Equity, Access and Deployment Act under the infrastructure bill, where the funds go to the states and then the states determine who they're going to grant funds to. So that would be your final service provider that gets the funds, but the funds come from the state. Separately, some commenters supported the interim final rules requirement that eligible projects be built to reliable speeds of 100 megabits per second symmetrical, with an exception for areas where it was impracticable, and encouragement that projects be built with fiber optic infrastructure. So if you're going to get grant funds through ARPA, you have to build to 100 by 100 infrastructure that can support that 100 by 100, unless it's impracticable, which would be really high cost areas. Maybe there's an area where it would be hard to lay fiber. It's granite, like 2 inches down, or top of a mountain, whatever it might be. There are ways that you can kind of get around that. So that's the impractical part. But then it says, while a few others argued that the interim rule should remain technology neutral and that lower speed standards would be more appropriate for today's usage needs. So you can imagine who was lobbying for each one of those things. You would have the fiber providers, like the Fiber Broadband Association and the providers there, that would be lobbying for, yeah, we need to make sure this is fiber, that's something that is future-proof, that can easily expand, easily do 100 by 100 and expand well beyond that for the future. And I'm sure you had maybe like WISPA, some wireless operators that were saying, no, we need to make sure that technologies other than fiber are there, that it needs to remain technology neutral, so that they're not putting a thumb on the scale for a particular technology. So you had those comments. Here's a summary of the Treasury response. In response to the comments, the final rule expands eligible service areas for investment by requiring recipients to invest in projects designed to provide service to households and businesses with an identified need for additional broadband infrastructure investment. In other words, they're not necessarily saying, okay, if this area is 25 by 3, then you can go in there and get grants and build out infrastructure. They're saying that you can make other determinations as to whether an area needs to have their broadband improved. That would include, but not be limited to, a lack of broadband service reliably delivering certain speeds. In addition, as discussed further below, the final rule further supports the expansion of affordable access to broadband service for households by requiring that recipients use a provider that participates in a qualifying affordability plan. So that's the other change, is the affordability part that I'll expand on here in a minute. Treasury encourages recipients to prioritize projects that are designed to provide service to locations not currently served by a wireline connection that reliably delivers at least 100 megabits per second of download speed and 20 megabits per second of upload speed. So they still do have that, where they're encouraging that. The final rule maintains the interim final rule's requirement that eligible projects be designed to, upon completion, reliably meet or exceed 100 meg symmetrical download and upload, as was the case under the interim final rule. In cases where it's not practicable because of the excessive cost of the project or geography or topography of the area to be served by the project. So it's very high cost, then you can look at a lower speed. Eligible projects may be designed to reliably meet or exceed 100 meg download speed by at least 20 meg and 100 megabits upload speed, and be scalable to a minimum of 100 meg download speed and 100 meg upload speed, if that makes any sense. So there's some leeway there if the area is high cost. Treasury continues to encourage recipients to prioritize investments in fiber optic infrastructure wherever feasible. So they did say we're going to continue to encourage that, and to focus on projects that will achieve last mile connections, whether by focusing directly on funding last mile projects or by ensuring that funded middle mile projects have commitments in place to support new and/or improved last mile service. So they really want to focus this on the last mile, but they're saying, middle mile could be funded if it's going to improve last mile service. Now, the Infrastructure Act, the IIJA, does have $1 billion, not a million. $1 billion for middle mile expansion in there. So there's money coming from that as well, for middle mile. The final rule requires recipients to address the affordability needs of low-income consumers in accessing broadband networks funded by SLFRF. That SLFRF is local, what is it, something local, I forget. But anyway, it's just basically it's the program. Given that such a project cannot be considered a necessary investment in broadband infrastructure if it's not affordable to the population the project would serve. Recipients must require that the service provider, and so again, recipients would be the state, must require that the service provider for a completed broadband infrastructure investment project that provides service to households to either participate in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program or otherwise provide access to a broad-based affordability program to low-income consumers in the proposed service area of the broadband infrastructure project that provides benefits to households commensurate with those provided under the ACP. So the ACP, Affordable Connectivity Program, is part of the Biden infrastructure bill that's under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So there is this ACP that's taking over for the emergency broadband benefit that came out as part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act with the coronavirus funds. So the EBB has now transitioned to the ACP. What they're saying here, this change that they made, was that if you're going to get these services, you need to be participating in the ACP, in the Affordable Care Act. So or you have to have your own affordable broadband program in place that is commensurate, provides the same kinds of features as the ACP. I don't know why you wouldn't just sign up for the ACP. The way the ACP works is that you sign up for that as a provider, then any of the plans that you offer any consumer out there, you need to also make available to anybody who's low income, and then they can sign up, the consumer can sign up, assuming that they're eligible based on their income level, whether they're getting certain assistance from the government already. They can sign up for the ACP, and then you can provide up to a $30 subsidy to them for any plan that they sign up for, up to $30, or $75 if it is on tribal lands, or $75 if it's been deemed a a high cost area. Now they're still trying to figure out in this Infrastructure Act, how they're going to figure out what's a high cost area, how they're going to track that and document all of that. But $75 high cost for tribal land, or $30 you can provide if it's just a regular consumer as part of this ACP. So I think most people would, rather than have your own program and duplicate everything and try to duplicate everything that's going on with the ACP, why not do the ACP? Because there's going to be funds available for promoting that. Consumers are going to know about that. So I think most people would go with that. As part of their project selection process, recipients are encouraged to consult with the community on the general affordability needs of the target markets in the proposed service area. Additionally, recipients are encouraged to require that services provided by broadband infrastructure project include at least one low-cost option offered without data usage caps and at speeds that are sufficient for a household with multiple users to simultaneously telework and engage in remote learning. So they want to make sure that there's at least one low-cost option, maybe $30, $50, somewhere in there, where it would be at least free for somebody on ACP, or possibly just $15, $20 for them to get broadband speed. And again, it's talking about something, no usage caps, which is interesting. That can be difficult at times. And then for users to simultaneously telework and engage in remote learning. So they want to make sure that people can stream, not have any issues there. Recipients will be required to report speed, pricing, and any data allowance information as part of mandatory reporting to the Treasury. So there are reports that are necessary, and you're going to have to follow those guidelines. Treasury continues to encourage recipients to prioritize support for broadband networks owned, operated by, or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and cooperatives. So the thrust has always been that they figure to make this affordable, if we try to go in the area of a nonprofit, obviously, they're still making a profit, so to speak, but it's a nonprofit, so the profits are smaller. Or a municipality, again, they're not necessarily saying that somebody has to sell it at cost, but a municipality is going to be less interested in higher profits if they're trying to serve the community. Same with maybe a co-op, cooperative EMC that's owned, partially owned by the people that live there. Then they're going to be maybe be able to keep the prices down lower. That's kind of the thrust there. And then the eligible areas for investment, again, there were they loosened this up a little bit. So the interim final rule limited eligible broadband investments to projects focused on delivering service to unserved or underserved locations, excuse me, defined as households or businesses that lack access to a wireline connection capable of reliably delivering at least minimum speeds of 25 by 3. And that's the minimum broadband definition right now from the FCC. A lot of people said that should be raised, but they left it at 25 by 3 this year. It'll probably be raised here, I'm assuming, soon to 100 by 20. Let's see what else we got here. I guess their response, go back down. I'm going to head down the response. So the Treasury response. The final rule expands eligible areas for investment by requiring recipients to invest in projects designed to provide service to households and businesses with an identified need for additional broadband infrastructure investment. So again, it's not necessarily saying it's got to be limited to 25 by 3. If it can be identified as an area that needs additional broadband infrastructure investment, then that would count. Recipients have flexibility to identify a need for additional broadband infrastructure investment. Recipients, again, being the state. So it's not that the service provider, the telephone company, the cable company, even the municipality can say, hey, you know what, I think this is an area we need to do. The state's got to look at that in conjunction with whoever the recipient is. Not the recipient, the final subgrantee of the money. Examples of this need to include lack of access to a connection that reliably meets or exceeds symmetrical 100 by 100, lack of affordable access to broadband service, or lack of reliable broadband service. Period, I guess. So 100 by 100. So the 25 by 3 is really not so much in there anymore. Recipients are encouraged to prioritize projects that are designed to provide service to locations not currently served by a wireline connection that reliably delivers at least 100 by 20. As many commenters indicated that those without such service constitute hard-to-reach areas in need of subsidized broadband deployment. Households and businesses with an identified need for additional broadband infrastructure investment do not have to be the only ones in the service area served by an eligible broadband infrastructure project. Indeed, serving these households and businesses may require a holistic approach that provide service to a wider area, for example, in order to make ongoing service of certain households or businesses within the service area economical. So this was actually, I think, in their interim rules as well. It's basically saying you don't need, if you've got an area defined and there are certain places where it's less than 100 by 20, in other areas it's, but I guess what it's saying is you can provide the service to a larger area and not just focus on that area, because that may make it more economical. So you can reach further out than that defined area as far as needing broadband, and even if there's other operators there providing service, you can go ahead and offer that service there as well, because it would be more economical for you to be able to do that. Rather than focusing on that one small area, you can broaden what you're doing, and it'll be more economical for you to do that way. So you're not limited to just that area. A couple more, just one or two more things in here I saw. This might be it coming up. You can see this is a long document. Here we go. Right here, usage of funds to meet non-federal match under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So the IIJA has a 25% matching requirement. So if you're going to get a grant through that, again, that money goes to the state, and then the state would then subgrant that to different operators, whether those be municipalities or cable companies, phone companies. But there's a 25% match that's required, but they're saying that you can use these ARPA funds for that 25% match, which is nice. So if you're going to be looking at the IIJA, you might want to get ARPA to be able to assist in that matching. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act specifies that, except as otherwise provided, an entity using funding shall provide a contribution of not less than 25% of project cost. It further states that the matching contribution may include funds provided to an eligible entity or a subgrantee under the American Rescue Plan Act for the purpose of deployment of broadband service. While Section 60102 allows states and other eligible entities to use SLFRF funds as a source of matching funds for broadband deployment, the requirements of the program still apply. As such, recipients that use funds to meet the Section 60102 matching requirement will continue to be subject to the requirements of the program. So this again has been known, but they're pointing out here that if you're going to take this money, this ARPA money, and use it for matching funds, you need to make sure that you're following the guidelines of ARPA to do that. Yeah, I think that was it. So that's the couple of changes, a couple of things I wanted to point out in these new final rules. So again, the interim final rules came out in May. These just came out just a few days ago, these final rules. I think it was, what was it saying? It was April that they would be in place. So again, I will go ahead and post a link to my prior video with the interim rules if you want to take a look. A long document again. I went through some of the things that I thought were key points. So if you're not already taking advantage of ARPA, if you're just getting into the broadband business, looking for a way to get funding while the IIJA is taking place or everything's being worked out on that, then ARPA would be a good source of funds for you to start looking at, again, through the state. Or if you're a state looking at getting broadband funds, getting your broadband office in place, again, you should look at ARPA, because it is going to be a while before you even get the notice of funding opportunity from the Commerce Department, the NTIA, on the IIJA, the infrastructure bill. So why not look at ARPA while you're getting all that in place? Thanks for joining me. If you like this, give me a thumbs up on the video, click subscribe, and click the little bell, and you'll be notified whenever I'm doing a broadcast. If you are in the business of broadband, or if you're looking at getting in the business of broadband, don't forget that we provide lots of services that can be of assistance to you, everything from pre-deployment, if you're looking for engineering services, feasibility studies, to deployment, laying fiber, to post-deployment, providing email services, provisioning, diagnostics, broadband diagnostics. Just give us a call. You see the information there. Send us an email. You see our website. Check us out. Thanks a lot again for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.